Welcome back, everybody. My next guest tonight is the lead singer and songwriter of Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. This month, he's releasing a new album, Wild God. Please welcome back to The Late Show, Nick Cave. Such a pleasure to have you on here.
Thank you.
You don't know this, but we have been in proximity before in Reykjavik in 2019. You were at a coffee shop, and me and my two boys, who at the time were 21 and 17, were right behind you. And one of my sons goes, "That really looks like Nick Cave." And I said, "I doubt we're standing behind Nick Cave at a coffee shop in Reykjavik." And then moments later, the person said, "Nick." And I got to tell you, you really look like Nick Cave.
I do. I've been told
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I have been. It's been mentioned often that I look like Nick Cave.
Last time you were here on the show performing was in 2017, and since then you've published a book. Here it is. It's Faith, Hope, and Carnage, in which you talk about creativity and grief and the power of music. Music is so powerful, it's like mysterious to me. And I'm curious how you see and how you express the power of music. What does it mean to you?
What is music to me?
What is the power of music to you?
Well, I think music is a thing that makes things better. You know, hey, this is going to be easy. You know, I mean, I really think it is one of the last, these guys know, it's one of the last legitimate opportunities we have for a transcendent experience really left to us. And you know, and we need to be careful with it. And
We need to be careful with it?
I think we need to, I think there's, well, I don't know if we need to get, you know, but I think there's forces out there that are expressly designed to take the creative act away from us, especially with AI as it's coming out at the moment.
To purely industrialize it.
Well, to create music as simply a product and to take away the actual creative... The creative experience is seen as a sort of impediment on the road to the product itself. Mm-hmm. That worries me a lot.
Music is magical to me because it does what magic does. It causes an effect at a distance. It can reach inside and change your heart and change your mind without touching
it. Absolutely can. And to play music live as a kind of communal experience, there's nothing really quite like that. To stand on stage, to perform to people is a genuinely transcendent opportunity, and I take that, you know, I take that very seriously, as one would take a sacred act seriously.
I think there is something sacred about performance of all kinds, humans being humans in front of humans.
Yeah.
Because we're all so good at hiding our own feelings, though we need to express our feelings, that we'll go pay money to see someone else express their feelings on stage so we can feel something.
Yeah, maybe that's the way. I find that there's something about music itself, essentially, that it is a kind of, it's a sort of glue that binds us together, and for me, music is really at the very soul and the core of the world, and it's used in all sorts of sacred forms as a sort of central, sort of binding agent that holds us together.
Has your view of music or the role that music plays in your life changed over the years? Like, was there a moment that you went, okay, this is it, I'm not going back, this is what I'm going to do with my life?
Well, I've always found music to be a way of arriving at a different place. You know, but I think when I first started off making music, my relationship with the audience especially was extremely adversarial. It was, I was, you know, part of the kind of punk rock movement, I guess, and it was really about coming up against the audience in
The hostile relationship?
a hostile relationship. But it was also transcendent at the same time, in the sense that I found that there was something going on stage where I could walk to be this thing, to walk onto stage and become this other thing. And I could see that happen to the audience as well. And so it's not dissimilar now that I still walk up to stage with a feeling of intense sort of dread about my sort of position in things, and to step onto the stage and this sort of evaporate into something that's where I become a larger, more complete person.
Did that dread always dissipate when you were younger? Because I find, certainly was my experience when I was not a musician, but a younger performer, and I see this in other younger performers, is that there's sometimes a hostility toward the audience out of nervousness, out of anxiety, out of fear that you won't be accepted. So instead, you cut it off with hostility before you ever get rejected.
Yeah, maybe. I was just a nasty little guy. I don't think I thought that deeply about it, really.
Well, nasty little guys don't always get to perform with Johnny Cash. Here you are. In 2002, you and Johnny Cash and Smokey Hormel and Rick Rubin. How did this come about?
Sure,
of course you may.
Wow, yeah. I wish I had have taken more photographs, actually. But I mean, just to be clear, Johnny Cash is my hero. I used to watch him as a child. They played the Johnny Cash show on TV in Australia, and I got to sit there as a child and see this man with this voice. And there was something about this voice that just it followed me all my life. And eventually he recorded one of my songs, The Mercy Seat. I don't know, like 50 years later, and then I got called into the studio by Rick Rubin to actually sing with Johnny Cash.
What did you guys
sing? It was the most
sing?
extraordinary thing. We did a version of a Hank Williams song, "Feel So Lonesome I Could Cry."
Mm-hmm.
It was a really beautiful moment. But I was like, I was terrified to sing with my hero, mostly because of his extraordinary, the sort of gravitas of his voice, and I was. I've always had huge misgivings about my voice and thought that I was going to screw the whole thing up. But anyway, when I got there quite early at the studio, and when he arrived, he was this was close to when he actually died, and he was not well at all, and it was. When I saw him, it was a sort of terrifying apparition of a man so different than the man that I thought him to be. Mm-hmm. And when he entered the studio, he had something wrong, where if he came from light into dark, he couldn't see. So he was essentially blind, walking down these stairs towards me with his hands out like this, going, "Are you there, Nick? Are you there?" And I'm looking at him thinking, how is this man going to perform? It was a. And then he sat down and he sat down with me and he said, "Look, I've had the flu. I've had laryngitis. I have no voice. I've never asked Jesus for anything," he said. "I never asked Jesus for anything, but I had to perform with you today. And last night I dropped down on my knees and I said, Jesus, I got to sing with Nick. Give me back my voice. Give me back my voice." And June Carter's there as well, and she's going, "Hallelujah, hallelujah." And it was an extraordinary moment. Then he goes, "I woke up this morning and I'm singing like a bird," he said like that. And then he sat down, this depleted man, and just transformed. And this is what I'm talking about, music. Transformed from this sort of suffering individual into something really extraordinary, literally before my eyes. And we sang this beautiful song together, and we finished the song, and there was this sort of dead silence, and Rick Rubin said, "Gentlemen, we're going to have to do that again." And I'm like, I'm flat, right? And he goes, "Nope, Johnny's flat." And I was like, oh,
Wow.
amateur.
Well, I'm curious about your process. You have a new album right here called Wild God. It's out on August 30th. And
Thank you.
first of all, how would you characterize this album? Like the songs on it, are they?
You know, people have been saying that it's a kind of a warm embrace. I heard a journalist. I was been doing press for it today. So I think it's essentially a joyful, uplifting kind of record, which is quite different than the records I normally make.
Not generally associated. The bright. You have beautiful music, but it can be quite somber sometimes.
Well, it's can be complex, and there's things, especially the last few records, a couple of records I've made, have been very fragile, very vulnerable sorts of things, and I think this record is some years on from sort of events that happened in my life that sort of required my music to be different in a way. And this is just a much more earthbound and joyful kind of record, I think.
For the people who may not know, what you're referring to is that you've suffered profound loss over the last decade. 2 of your sons. I'm so sorry to hear that. I can't imagine.
Thank you.
But you're very open about your grief. It seems important to you, especially in this book. You talk about processing grief. And I'm curious, many people don't want to talk about grief. People don't know how to approach grief. They think it's sort of feeling I've gotten from some people sometimes that grief is in some way like contagious, or they don't know what to say. They want to say the wrong thing. And I'm curious, what have you received from other people about the grief that you've experienced in your life that has been useful to you, or meaningful, or powerful?
Yeah. I mean, I think that I've found the most articulate responses are not through words in the end. And when I was, deep in it, and my life had fallen apart, it wasn't what people said anyway that was of any value. It was really of what people did, and the idea that people were there for me, and that people could make me a cup of tea, or make my wife a cup of tea, or I talk about in the book the first time that I went out in public in the sort of seaside town where I lived, and I'm well known in the town, and it was a strange feeling to go out, and everyone knew about what had happened when Arthur died. And I went into a vegetarian takeaway restaurant, which I'd often go, and I knew quite well one of the girls who worked there, a wonderful person, and I sort of was in a line and came up to her, and she didn't say anything. And I was kind of shocked because, don't you know what's happened to me? And I gave her the money, and she handed me back the change and just squeezed my hand as she gave me back the money. And this felt to me, I'll never forget that, because it was so beautifully, quietly articulate of one human being responding to another human being that was beyond language, beyond words, And so I think it's these small kindnesses that really resonate.
For the people who out there who have experienced great loss and often do it alone, what is something you'd like to know about?
What I like them to know?
What would, from your experience, is there anything you'd like them to know about getting through this grief?
Well, I think there's a decision that we need to make when these, this is not particular to me. This is ordinary stuff on some level that everyone goes through eventually in one way or another. We all go through these sorts of things, and we have a choice. I think that we can on some level, there is a desire to turn inward and to sort of wrap ourselves around the absence of the person that we've lost, to sort of, as if there's some sort of nobility in wrapping ourselves around the absence of that person. And I think this is a very dangerous situation and a mistake, and that we must be able to turn ourselves the other way and look at the world and understand that we are part of the world, and that the world is essentially full of people who have lost things. And it is deeply understanding the sort of vulnerable, precarious nature of each of us, and that we need to understand that that is what we are. And I've found, by looking at the world in that way, that I saw the world not as a cruel place, but as an extraordinarily systemically beautiful place to live in. And and that's out there. That's why if we're talking about this record, it's a joyful record where that there is joy and there is happiness in a way you've could never believe possible on the other side of grief. And it's a terrible truth about grief that ultimately you can feel joy in a way that you never thought you could.
Perceive it in a way that you never could. See the preciousness of it.
When you're first when these things first happen to you, to hear someone speak in this way that I'm speaking now, it's enraging to think that.
Yes.
that you could ever be happy. How dare you say that you could ever be happy? But it's true. If we look at the world for what it is, there's great joy to be experienced there.
Are you a Leonard Cohen fan?
Yeah, I am.
Well, the song Suzanne speaks to that, to
Yeah.
me, when he says, Jesus was a sailor who walked upon the water, and he spent a long time watching from his lonely wooden tower, until he knew for certain only drowning men could see him. And he said, all men will be sailors then, until the sea shall free them.
Beautifully put.
It is the drowning that frees us.
Yeah, it is the devastation that I think that we all experience, that turns us from being a kind of a badly or a half-formed person into a fully formed or fully realized human being. It is the devastation, and it's. I don't mean to be sort of the prophet of doom, but this is sort of coming for everybody at some point. If you're loved and you love, this is part of the deal.
I think it's coming for you if you're lucky.
Yeah, well,
That means that you've lived long enough and
Yeah.
you've loved hard enough to experience the devastation, but it's all just a part of being fully human.
that's right.
You have this you've guided people through their own experience with something called the Red Hand Files. This is an example of the Red Hand Files. We have
Yes.
someone who's experienced it. What are the
One person out there.
Yeah. They say if you can touch one person, that's not enough.
Exactly.
What are the Red Hand Files?
The Red Hand Files is something that's been going maybe 6 years or something like that grew out of, I think, that kind of grew out of the death of my child in a way, but it was really a kind of ask me anything type of thing. It was a small idea that has now grown into something quite massive and central to what I do, and it is essentially people write in and ask me questions about things, many of which I have absolutely no authority to answer at all, but do anyway. And I try and answer their letters in a cautious, compassionate way.
Would you mind reading one of them?
Yeah?
This is one that we selected. Would you mind reading?
Okay. So the question, someone has written in, called Valerio from Stockholm, has written in saying, following the last few years, I'm feeling empty and more cynical than ever. I'm losing faith in other people, and I'm scared to pass these feelings on to my little son. Do you still believe in us, human beings? So this is the letter that I wrote. Dear Valerio, much of my early life was spent holding the world and the people in it in contempt. It was a position both seductive and indulgent. The truth is, I was young and had no idea what was coming down the line. It took a devastation to teach me the preciousness of life and the essential goodness of people. It took a devastation to reveal the precariousness of the world, of its very soul, and to understand that the world was crying out for help. It took a devastation to understand the idea of mortal value, and it took a devastation to find hope. Unlike cynicism, hopefulness is hard-earned, makes demands upon us, and can often feel like the most indefensible and lonely place on earth. Hopefulness is not a neutral position, it is adversarial. It is the warrior emotion that can lay waste to cynicism. Each redemptive or loving act, as small as you like, such as reading to your little boy, or showing him a thing you love, or singing him a song, or putting on his shoes, keeps the devil down in the hole. It says the world and its inhabitants have value and are worth defending. It says the world is worth believing in. In time, we come to find that this is so. Love, Nick.
The book is Faith, Hope, and Carnage. The new album, Wild God, comes out on August 30th. Nick Cave. And I just want to say, hold on before you go, what you just saw at home is just a scrap of the conversation that we had, and the rest of it will be put online as soon as we can, hopefully tonight, so everyone can see the extraordinary conversation Nick just gave us. Thanks so much, Nick.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. We'll be right back. Hold on one second.